China is pledging to cancel debt to Africa. Is the Chinese Communist Party doing something good? Or is this just another lie? Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Matt Gnezda. This episode is sponsored by PC Doctor Toolbox. Monitor your PC for software crashes, hardware failures, and the kind of glitches that make your life miserable. So, the Chinese Communist Party is lying to you. Even when it's telling the truth, it's lying by being so misleading you think something is good when it's actually bad. Bloomberg News published this article last week, praising China for waiving some of its loans to Africa and offering $10 billion of International Monetary Fund reserves. And this story was also picked up by a lot of other media, like Quartz, News Corp Australia, and Prime Business Africa. Obviously, what's going on here is that the Chinese Communist Party is being extremely generous to forgive all these loans. Either that or those reporters just took China's foreign minister at his word without any critical thinking whatsoever. Here's what Foreign Minister Wang Yi said earlier this month at the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation. China will waive the 23 interest-free loans for 17 African countries that had matured by the end of 2021. And he didn't actually give any other details, like which 17 countries or how much money. But he did say the loan forgiveness comes in the face of the various forms of hegemonic and bullying practices. I assume that's the United States and Europe. But okay, 23 loans, 17 countries. Sounds like a pretty big deal. Except it's not. Even assuming it's true, the overall impression it gives of the Chinese Communist Party's generosity is a big, fat lie. China forgiving 23 loans is not very many when you consider that China has nearly 1,200 loans across Africa. So that's less than 2%. And forgiving those interest-free loans is not even special. China has been doing that for years. China traditionally waives interest-free loans, which are offered by China's foreign aid agency. In other words, China never expected these interest-free loans to get paid back. They were intended to be gifts all along. So why would China even bother to label them loans? Well, maybe they want to make sure the recipient nation knows who their daddy is.
But the Chinese government would expect the countries that are at the receiving end of this Chinese generosity to reciprocate in terms of giving support to Chinese government policies and positions on controversial global matters.
So to get these wonderful interest-free loans that they don't have to pay back, countries have to support China on controversial global matters like, I don't know, the future invasion of Taiwan, or Huawei building 5G networks, or Chinese intelligence agents kidnapping Chinese dissidents overseas. As Foreign Minister Wang Yi put it in his speech announcing the loan forgiveness, China appreciates the firm commitment of African countries to the One China principle and your strong support for China's efforts to safeguard sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity. So these loans were actually gifts, except that they were structured as loans so the Communist Party could attach political strings and then demand the money back if the countries didn't comply. And like I said, they represent only a tiny fraction, maybe 2% of China's total loans to Africa. The other 90-something% of China's loans to Africa are real loans that do have to be paid back. The money is usually loaned for building belt and road infrastructure projects. They're financed by China, built using mostly Chinese labor, and they sometimes don't go quite as planned. Like the African Union headquarters, where Chinese contractors added surveillance devices that can be monitored from Beijing. And the freight railway from Ethiopia to Djibouti, which is hemorrhaging money. And the Sigiri Bridge in Kenya, which just collapsed. I can build Legos more stable than that. Now, not every Chinese project in Africa ends in horrible disaster, though. Some of them just never end. China's Belt and Road Initiative has produced a scattering of large, unfinished, or grossly economically inefficient projects. For more than a decade, the Chinese Communist Party aggressively pushed loans on African countries. There are 54 countries in Africa. 49 of them have taken Chinese loans, and most of them are having a hard time paying the loans back. So much so that China is getting worried. I'll explain after the break. Welcome back. China is starting to get worried about Africa's indebtedness to it. For example, in 2020, Zambia became the first African nation to default on its debt to foreign lenders. And it still owes China $6.6 billion. For context, that's a third of the country's GDP. There's no way they're going to pay all of that back. Other African countries are struggling too. Which is why, in 2021, for the first time, China cut down new investment pledges from $60 billion to $40 billion. See, the Chinese regime doesn't want African countries to completely fail. They want them to succeed just enough to encourage other countries to join the Belt and Road Initiative, and to fail just enough that China can negotiate settlements, like taking over ports that can be used as future naval bases. Whether the countries can pay back the loans or not, the Chinese Communist Party wins. That's what's called win-win mutual cooperation. Now, in addition to all this dog and pony show loan forgiveness, I mentioned that China is also offering Africa $10 billion of International Monetary Fund reserves. What does that mean? Well, you'd be right to guess it's not as benevolent as it sounds. One thing the IMF does is help countries lend and borrow money among each other. The IMF is like a facilitator, a middleman in the lending business. So when China offers $10 billion in IMF funds to Africa, it's not a gift, it's actually another loan. Basically, China is saying it'll loan the equivalent of $10 billion to African countries via the IMF, in this case, to help them recover from the devastating effects of the COVID-19 pandemic and debt crisis. Both of which problems were largely caused by China in the first place, but let's not worry about that. Oh, and the African countries that get this money still need to pay interest to the IMF, and then the IMF will pay that interest to China. So China gets to look benevolent while also earning money. Another great example of win-win mutual cooperation. So next time you read that the Chinese Communist Party is doing something good, like waiving loans or offering money, take it with a grain of salt. It could end like this. And this episode is sponsored by PC Doctor Toolbox. There are many reasons your computer crashes, like buggy software, hardware failures, and general slowdowns with older computers. And the worst part is your computer always seems to crash at the worst time, like when you're about to give a presentation, or when you're on the road, or you're writing a script about Africa loans and trying to load it onto the teleprompter. Fortunately, there's PC Doctor Toolbox with remote monitoring. If you're concerned about the health of your computer and want tools to prevent untimely system issues, you should be using PC Doctor Toolbox. Stop crashes before they happen. And we have a special announcement for China Uncensored viewers. Toolbox is now free for personal use on up to 5 PCs with free remote monitoring. Use the link below to sign up and download your 5 free copies of Toolbox today. I'm Matt Gnezda. Thanks for watching China Uncensored.